The summer of 1988 began like any other in Willow Creek, Missouri. A sleepy stretch of farmland where time moved slowly and secrets settled deep like the morning fog. But on a still August morning, the silence was ripped apart by the roar of fire consuming an old farmhouse daycare. In its wake, 3 toddlers vanished, and the town's innocence burned with them. The fire was ruled accidental. The case closed. For 36 years, the townsfolk carried that scar in silence, believing the flames had taken everything. But the past never stays buried. Not forever. Decades later, in the spring of 2024, the land stirred again. Mark Reynolds didn't expect anything unusual when he started pulling up the floorboards in the farmhouse next door, the same farmhouse that had stood empty since the fire. Rain had seeped into the wood, and the boards came up easier than he expected. Halfway through removing the second plank, the crowbar struck metal instead of subfloor. His brow furrowed. Something about that sound. It didn't belong. "Em, come here for a sec," he called softly, not out of fear, but something stranger, a reverent curiosity. Emily appeared in the doorway, her sleeves rolled up, jeans streaked with primer, and her face glowing with the soft confidence of a woman used to turning forgotten homes into living ones. She wiped her hands on a rag and crossed the room. "Is it mold again?" "No," Mark said, tapping the metal hidden beneath the floor. "Listen." Clink, clink. They both froze. That wasn't a joist. That was something else. Flat, solid, intentional. Kneeling together, they worked away the boards, revealing a square patch of rusted steel embedded in the floor. A hatch, with a recessed handle and faint hinges nearly camouflaged by age and grime. It was never in the blueprints, never mentioned in the listing. Emily leaned in, eyes narrowing. "This isn't just old construction." Mark nodded slowly. "It's hidden." The house had been a foreclosure, 5 acres, cheap and quiet. A structure listed as lightly fire-damaged, with a detached outbuilding no longer in use. But now that description felt like a lie by omission. Mark pried gently, the screwdriver slipping under the hatch's rusted edge. Emily ran to grab the PB blaster. They didn't need to speak. After years of flipping homes together, they'd found oddities. A well, a root cellar, even a forgotten storm shelter. But this felt different. This felt secret. The bolts hissed with age as Mark cracked the seal. Dust rose in a gray puff, stale and dry. Beneath the hatch was a narrow shaft, just large enough to crawl into, with wooden walls reinforced by concrete, descending into darkness. The smell hit them next. Cool mildew tinged with something unsettlingly sweet. "Is that?" Emily whispered. "Baby powder," Mark said, barely above a breath. The look they shared was quiet but thunderous. This wasn't a storage space. This was something else, something deliberately hidden. Without hesitation, Mark swung his legs into the shaft. The flashlight in his hand cast erratic shadows against the tunnel walls. "I'm going first." Emily nodded, pressing a lantern into his hand. "Be careful." The crawl was narrow and damp, every movement echoing in the silence. When Mark's voice came back up, it was hushed, but urgent. "It opens up down here." Emily didn't wait. She followed. Her boots hit the cold floor, and her breath caught in her throat. The space beneath the house was wide and low, 12 feet across, 10 feet deep. A room, not a root cellar, not a shelter, but a concealed chamber. And it had been built to last. The air was colder than it should have been. The walls, though aged, were sturdy, like someone had wanted this place to be forgotten but never disturbed. As her eyes adjusted, Emily took in the details. The reinforced corners, the faint scrape marks on the concrete, the way the light caught something small and metallic glinting in the dust. This was no accident. Above them, Willow Creek slept, still caught in a decades-old lullaby of tragedy and unanswered questions. But down here, the truth was beginning to stir. Whispers rising from the ash, from the cold, From the secrets long buried beneath a floor no one was ever supposed to lift. And for the first time in 36 years, the story was no longer finished. It was just beginning again. The moment Emily stepped into the hidden room, the temperature dropped, not just in the air but in her chest, like something ancient and sorrowful had wrapped itself around her ribcage. The walls were lined with insulation, light blue, stained with time, and curling at the edges like forgotten pages. The floor was covered in cracked linoleum, yellowed and brittle, like the past itself was peeling away. But it wasn't the decay that stopped her breath. It was what stood quietly at the room's center. A crib. A white wooden crib, its paint faded to ivory, its edges worn down by tiny teeth, its bars splintered where restless hands must have once gripped tight. Time had softened its lines, but not its meaning. Around it were artifacts frozen in time, a rocking horse with flaking paint, a plush giraffe leaning like it had collapsed from exhaustion, a plastic stacking toy whose colors had dulled to dusty pastels. Emily took a step back, her hand over her heart. "Oh my God," she whispered, more prayer than curse. The room wasn't a storage space. It was a nursery, not a modern one with digital monitors and foam bumpers, but something unmistakably from the 1980s. The wallpaper, though peeling, was adorned with cartoon ducks and rabbits wearing polka dot hats. A mobile above the crib spun gently in the draft, its faded stars creaking on threadbare strings. In the corner stood a dusty pink baby walker. A plastic bin overflowed with worn-out board books, their spines softened by small fingers long gone. A faded high chair, slumped under the weight of time, and beneath a shelf, plugged into an ancient wall socket, was a cassette recorder. Emily moved closer, the air thick with the scent of aged wood, mildew, and something heartbreakingly out of place. Baby powder. The sweetness of it was overwhelming, as if clinging to a memory that refused to fade. "I don't like this," she murmured. Mark nodded, eyes narrowed, breathing slow. "This doesn't feel abandoned," he said. "It feels preserved." The beam from her flashlight flicked across the crib and stopped. Letters, plastic and faded, spelled out a name, Jamie. Emily froze, her chest constricted. "Wait," she said, voice thinning. Mark turned quickly. "You know that name?" She didn't answer right away, only reached into her pocket, fingers trembling slightly, and pulled up a search. Her screen glowed softly between them. "Willow Creek, 1988. The daycare fire," she whispered. 3 kids, presumed dead. Their names were Jamie Holt, Milo Renair, and Lacey Parks. Mark's face turned ashen. "That's not a coincidence." Emily's breath quickened as she crossed the room, weaving through ghosts of a life interrupted. She reached the shelf and examined its contents. Tiny shoes lined up in pairs, a sippy cup still sticky with age, a pacifier tucked behind a book. She knelt, moved a box, and found it. Another crib. This one labeled LACY. A mobile hung above it too, the kind with music. She turned the tiny plastic ring. The melody of Rock-a-Bye Baby began to play, warped, slow, and deeply unsettling, like a lullaby meant for shadows. Mark turned in place, surveying the room like it might breathe. "Why would anyone build this under a house?" Emily's voice came out flat, but cold with realization. "Because someone wanted to hide something, or someone." She scanned the room again, and then spotted it. A third crib, half hidden behind dusty boxes in the far corner. Smaller, older. She stepped forward. A name was etched in the same plastic letters. Milo. 3 cribs. 3 names. 3 children who were never supposed to be found. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, the weight of 36 years collapsing in her chest. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears. Then, creaking. Mark heard it too. Above them, footsteps. Someone was walking across the living room, just beyond the open hatch. Emily instantly clicked off the flashlight, grabbing Mark's arm. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint light bleeding through the trap door. Silence, then stillness. The footsteps had stopped. Mark's whisper cut through the dark. "We left the front door unlocked." Emily's stomach turned. Willow Creek was the kind of place where locks gathered rust. But this timing? No one should have been there. More creaking, fainter now, retreating. "Mark," Emily breathed. "We need to go." He nodded, lifting himself back into the tunnel with quiet, deliberate motion. He peeked into the living room. Empty. No sounds, no movement. The door was ajar. Someone had been there, had seen. Emily climbed up after him, brushing dust from her knees, heart still pounding as she approached the open door and looked outside. Nothing. Just wind. Just the sun rising over quiet farmland. But something had changed. Mark pulled out his phone. "We're calling this in." The sheriff's office arrived in under 12 minutes. Deputy Dana Yates stepped out of the car with a notepad in hand, her movements careful, her eyes taking in every detail. She was Willow Creek, born and raised. Had been a teenager when the fire consumed the daycare. Had stood with the search team that found nothing but ash. Now, in her 50s, her face was weathered but sharp with memory. "You said you found a sealed room." Mark nodded. "It was under the subfloor. We weren't even looking for it." Emily added, "It's not on any blueprint. We checked." Dana's expression darkened. "Show me." They led her inside. She paused at the hatch, hesitated, then handed Mark her radio. "If I'm not back in 5 minutes, call it in again." She descended into the shadows. When Dana reached the nursery, her entire body stilled. Jamie, Milo, Lacey. She whispered their names like a litany, moving between the cribs with reverence, as if she were walking through a mausoleum. When she climbed out 15 minutes later, her face was pale. "This is a crime scene," she said, her voice like stone. "Don't touch anything else. Don't move." Within hours, the Crenshaw farmhouse was cordoned off with yellow tape. A coroner's van parked outside. A mobile forensics unit began documenting every inch of the space beneath. Detective Rachel Lier arrived just after 6. Sharp, quiet, late 30s, with boots still muddy from her last case and a gaze that didn't flinch. She moved like someone used to grief. 30 minutes later, she stepped back into daylight. "I want everything bagged. Toys, bedding, recorder, especially the tapes." She turned to Emily. "You said the room was hidden under the floor?" Emily nodded. "No stairs, just a shaft." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "That construction isn't from 1910. It's too clean, reinforced plywood. I'd guess late 70s, early 80s. "Whoever built it knew what they were doing," Mark said softly. Rachel didn't answer. Emily added, "There were 3 cribs, but no bodies, just toys." Rachel turned to them again. "Do you know anything about the previous owner?" Mark replied, "We bought it after foreclosure. It sat empty for years. The last listed owner was a man named Stanley March." Rachel froze. Stanley March was the fire marshal on the original investigation. Emily's breath caught. "I didn't know that." Rachel looked like someone had pulled the ground out from under her. "He's the one who ruled the fire accidental." And just like that, 36 years of silence turned into something else. Suspicion, betrayal, and something worse than either. Truth. For 15 years, the man who'd once ruled the fire and electrical failure lived quietly in the very house he claimed had nothing to hide. But now, the truth had clawed its way out from beneath the floor. By the next morning, the story had exploded. A news van parked across the street, satellite dish aimed skyward. Reporters roamed the edge of the police perimeter, broadcasting live feeds into homes across Missouri and beyond. Headlines blazed in red. 3 cribs found in hidden nursery. Cold case reopened. Willow Creek, population 623, became the epicenter of a mystery that refused to stay buried. Detective Rachel Lier stood firm on the courthouse steps, eyes shadowed by sleepless hours and something darker: disbelief. "We are now treating this site as a potential location of prolonged child confinement," she told the press. "The identities of those involved and their connection to the 1988 fire remain under active investigation. All recovered evidence, including tapes and objects found in the sealed nursery, is being processed." The microphones crackled. Cameras flashed. But Rachel's voice didn't waver. "This case is officially reopened." Mark and Emily stayed silent, refusing all interviews. They moved into a cheap motel just off Route 5, too shaken to sleep, too haunted to stay in the house they'd nearly called home. At night, Emily stared at the motel ceiling and saw the cribs, the names, and the question that kept clawing at her. What if those children hadn't died in the fire at all? Back at the station, Rachel sat alone in a dim review room. In front of her lay a spread of unmarked VHS tapes, more than 30, with more still arriving from behind hidden walls. Every label was handwritten in the same shaky block letters. White sticker, blue ink. No dates. Just names. Jamie January, Milo March, Lacey April, combined July. Each tape felt like a sealed confession, a fragment of something too cruel to be imagined. She pressed play. The screen blinked to life with static, then settled on the image of the underground nursery, back when it was new, freshly painted, cheerful in a way that made Rachel's skin crawl. A woman's voice spoke from off-screen. Southern accent, gentle, rehearsed. "Okay, little ones, let's start with our stretching." The camera panned to 3 toddlers, standing side by side in front of the crib labeled LACY. Their clothes matched, their eyes didn't. Vacant, distant, void of fear, but void of everything else too. "We say thank you to Mr. March for our home. Everybody clap." They clapped, in perfect unison. Once. Rachel rewound it, played it again. Same movement, same emptiness. She scribbled a note. "Children appear conditioned, possibly coached. Female voice, approximately age 50s. Suspect, Doris Creighton." The second tape was worse. Milo 03. This one had no movement behind the camera. It was stationary, fixed in a corner, like surveillance. A playpen sat in the center of the room. Milo, small, curly-haired, sat cross-legged, attempting to fit shapes into a sorter. He struggled, tried a square in the circle hole. Again. A buzzer sounded. Harsh. Milo flinched. Then, a different voice. Male, flat, commanding. "Try again, Milo." He tried, failed. The buzzer again. Rachel leaned forward, fingers digging into her notepad. This wasn't just captivity. This was behavioral programming, obedience training. She watched Milo fail again and again until he curled in on himself and began to rock. Rachel shut off the tape. It took her 10 minutes to start breathing normally again. Later that afternoon, she called in Officer Dana Yates, played a clip from Combined 07. The video showed all 3 children sitting at a miniature table, crayons in hand. The wall behind them bore a message scrawled in chalk. "Be good. Obey." The woman spoke again from behind the camera. Dana's face changed. "That's her," she said, voice trembling. "That's Doris Creighton." "You're sure?" "I'd swear it. She died of cancer in 2003. She's buried right here in Willow Creek." Rachel stared at the screen, where the image froze on the 3 toddlers. Their heads bowed, their hands moving slowly over coloring pages. "She was the daycare owner," Rachel said. "Everyone thought she was an angel," Dana murmured. "Patient, gentle, the kind of woman who remembered every birthday." Rachel's eyes stayed on the frozen frame. "Sweet," she echoed, voice hollow. That night, she drove out to the Crenshaw property herself. The forensics team was still working. 2 more boxes of items had just been recovered. Juice bottles, utensils, chalk drawings, tiny cloth diapers. A picture of slow, structured life. Not for days, for months, maybe longer. One of the techs approached with a metal file box. Inside, Rachel found index cards, laminated, labeled by child. Each one a clinical log. Milo, dietary, discipline, Jamie, sleep patterns, noise, response. Lacey, vocal development, obedience tests. Each card was obsessively detailed. Meals logged to the minute, behavioral triggers cataloged, outcomes scored, neatly written, underlined, an arrow system coded with numerical grading. Rachel picked one at random. March 6th, 1988. Jamie responded well to auditory test. Followed musical cue after 4.2 seconds, reinforced with gummy bear reward. Rachel stepped back. Cold flooded her spine. "This wasn't a daycare," she whispered. "This was a lab." Back at the department, she contacted Marcus Fields, the town's unofficial historian, retired librarian, a man who remembered every address, every family, every rumor with archival precision. "Do you remember a man named Stanley March?" Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Fire marshal, came from Springfield in '84, quiet, never married, retired right after the fire, bought that property not long after." Rachel slid a photo across the table. 3 cribs, 1 room. He stared, then nodded. "That's Doris Creighton's wallpaper." "You're sure?" "I'd bet my pension. She special ordered it. I remember because she let the kids help pick the pattern." Rachel's heart thudded once. "Stanley March bought that house 2 months after the fire, paid cash, no mortgage." "You think he moved them?" Marcus asked softly. "I think Doris didn't act alone," Rachel replied. "I think March helped her build that room, and I think he kept them hidden after the fire, maybe for years." Marcus whispered, "But why?" Rachel stared down at the laminated behavior cards. The tapes, the blank eyes of children frozen in time. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'm going to find out." 2 days later, Rachel sat in the fluorescent-lit records archive of Jefferson County, surrounded by dust and silence. She followed a breadcrumb, a strange phrase on one of the cards, Obedience Response Index. The term didn't match standard child psychology metrics, but it led her here. The file was labeled Missouri Youth Cognitive Behavioral Study, MYCBS, 1985 to 1989. No results published, no follow-up, just paper trails. Inside were memos, grant forms, and one architectural sketch titled Suggested Layout for Controlled Play-Based Obedience Conditioning, Age 1 to 5. The diagram matched the hidden nursery beneath the farmhouse. Nearly identically, funded through a quiet sub-department at a rural university. A pilot study on trauma resilience and obedience thresholds in toddlers. The language was cold, academic, but the implications were anything but. Rachel closed the folder. She now knew the children hadn't been hidden because someone was afraid of being caught. They'd been hidden because someone wanted to see what would happen when no one was watching at all. The language on the documents was icy, clinical, detached, devoid of humanity. Rachel flipped each page like she was peeling away the skin of a lie that had grown roots. Her stomach churned as she underlined key excerpts with a pencil worn to the nub. Phase 2 requires complete environmental control. Subjects must not interact with biological parents post-separation. Reward and punishment cycles must remain consistent for measurable obedience thresholds. Her hands shook as she read the final line. Coordination with local fire safety officials advised. Rachel underlined it twice. Fire safety. It wasn't just an experiment. It had been protected, built with cooperation, with silence. The next page stopped her cold. A sign-in sheet. Most names were scrubbed with faded black ink, but one remained. At the bottom, handwritten, St. March. Stanley March hadn't just covered up a fire. He was part of something vast, something systemic. He hadn't just hidden children. He'd built a behavioral experiment. He had created the environment itself. Back at the Willow Creek Police Department, Rachel spread everything across the conference room table. Research files, tapes, behavior logs. Her coffee sat cold beside her as she cued a newly recovered tape. The label, almost illegible, read, Combined Session, April 13th, 1988. The tape opened to the familiar nursery. The children, older now, closer to 4, sat thinner, paler, but still obedient. In front of each lay a laminated card. A sun, a tree, a face, a house. Off-screen, a woman's voice asked softly, "Which one makes you feel safe?" Jamie pointed to the face. "And which one makes you hurt?" Milo hesitated, then pointed to the sun. "And which one disappears?" Lacey's hand trembled. "Answer." She pointed to the house. Rachel paused the tape, her throat tightening. This wasn't language training. It was emotional programming, fear conditioning. Each session ended the same. The children placed their hands on their laps, turned to face the wall, and recited in unison, "Thank you for today," like they were in school, or prison, or something worse. That night, Rachel returned to the Crenshaw house. She followed a cleared path behind the structure, flashlight in hand. The forensic team had flagged something odd about the nursery's floor, its unnatural levelness. Beneath the linoleum, beneath the subfloor, they had discovered a poured concrete slab. Rachel crouched. She tapped her knuckles against the floor beneath where Jamie's crib had once stood. A faint crack. A seam. Not from aging, from design. She radioed for backup. Half an hour later, beneath floodlights and surrounded by breathless silence, they pried open the slab. Beneath it, a small, shallow pit lined with the remnants of a plastic tarp. Inside were 3 pairs of children's shoes, neatly arranged, untouched by time. Beneath them, a rusted metal lunchbox. Inside the box, 3 folded drawings and 1 cassette. Rachel opened each drawing, her breath catching. Lacey's was a house on fire. Milo's, 3 stick figures behind bars. One had a speech bubble. No. Jamie's, a tall man in square glasses holding hands with a smaller child, whose eyes were drawn as X's. Rachel inserted the cassette into her player back at the station, alone, static, then humming. A child's voice. "Jamie, I'm not supposed to talk when it's dark, but I want to say something." Silence. "If someone finds this, I was here. I was real." Rachel pressed her hand to her mouth. "He says we won't be remembered, that we're part of the test, but I don't want to be a test. I want to go home." A pause. "Please tell my mommy I love her. Tell her I remember her face, even in the dark." Then came something Rachel hadn't expected. A second voice, faint, overlapping. "I do too." It was not Jamie. Later, in the evidence room, gloved and methodical, Rachel played that 5-second clip again and again, pushing it through audio filters. The second voice was female, slightly older, cautious, whispered, "Shh, they'll hear us." Rachel's spine stiffened. "Could Jamie have shared the recorder?" she asked the regional forensic linguist. "Unlikely, but possible. Mono mic, same distance, 2 people side by side." Rachel stared into the dark. What if the second voice wasn't one of the 3? "Then," the analyst said quietly, "you're missing a name." Rachel tore through the behavior logs again. Jamie, Milo, Lacey, every movement cataloged. But one card stood out, unlabeled. No name, just cryptic, chilling phrases. Doesn't respond to visual cues. Isolate for 72 hours. Refers to self as baby blue. She circled that phrase. It had never been in any report, never in any press coverage. She scanned the original daycare attendance logs. 12 children were present the day of the fire. 9 were accounted for. 3 were declared dead. 1 more had never been listed. Later that afternoon, at the Missouri Department of Health, Rachel combed through the sealed child welfare files from 1988. Only one stood out. A female toddler, estimated age 4, found wandering Route 9 2 months after the fire. No speech, malnourished, no claimants. Tattoo on her wrist, a single letter B. She was given a placeholder name, Bryn, and later adopted. Rachel requested the file. The name, Bryn M. Caldwell. Adopted in July 1990. Current status, alive, 28 years old. Living in Springfield, Missouri. Rachel's hand trembled as she scrolled through the DMV photo. Bryn's eyes were distant, one slightly off-center. A scar curved just above her left brow, and on her wrist, faint but unmistakable, the letter B. Rachel sat in her cruiser, staring at the name. Bryn hadn't died in the fire. She had survived, and no one knew. Rachel picked up her phone and dialed the number listed. 2 rings. A soft voice answered. "Hello?" Rachel took a breath. "Bryn Caldwell?" "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Detective Rachel Lier with the Willow Creek Police Department." A long pause. "I'm investigating a case involving the 1988 Willow Creek daycare fire." Silence. Total silence. But Bryn was listening, and the truth was waiting. Rachel's voice was calm, but her hand trembled slightly around the phone. "We believe you may have been one of the children kept in a sealed nursery beneath a home in Willow Creek." There was silence. Then, Bryn whispered, "You weren't supposed to find me." Rachel's grip tightened. "I know this is overwhelming, but you're not in trouble. You were a child. You were a victim. You deserve the truth, and we need yours." A breath on the line. "I don't remember everything," Bryn said, "but I remember the dark. I remember him, his glasses, and how he said the fire was a gift, that it made us disappear." Rachel's stomach turned. "Can we meet?" Another long pause. Then, "I don't go out at night, but I'll try." That night, Rachel didn't sleep. She watched the tapes again, her ears trained on every whisper, every pause. Jamie's broken voice echoing, "I want to go home." There were always 4. One erased, one who survived. The next morning in Springfield, Missouri, the rain drew gray lines down the windows of a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. At 10:02 a.m., Rachel walked in. Jazz hummed low beneath the hiss of espresso machines. College kids huddled behind laptops. A mother tore a muffin for her toddler. And in the back booth by the window, Bryn. She sat rigid, eyes locked on the entrance, a ceramic mug untouched before her. Her gray sweater sleeves were pulled over her knuckles. Her hair was clipped back, and her posture was that of someone still bracing for a blow. Rachel approached slowly. "Bryn?" she asked softly. A nod. Silent. Rachel slid into the seat opposite. "Thank you for coming." Bryn said nothing. Her eyes blinked rapidly, as if fending off something rising behind them. Eventually she spoke. "I haven't talked about it in 20 years. Rachel nodded. "You don't have to remember it all, just what you can." Bryn looked down. "I didn't remember, not until you called." Rachel laid a photo on the table, a still frame from one of the tapes. 3 children sat at a plastic table. In the corner, almost hidden, a 4th child facing the wall. "Is that you?" she asked. Bryn stared at the image, fingers trembling. "I remember that shirt. It had a duck. It was mine." Rachel gave her time to sit with it. "You were never listed among the missing. You weren't reported. Just the letter B." Bryn whispered. "They didn't call me Bryn. I didn't have a name. I gave myself one later. Baby Blue. That's what was painted on the wall behind my crib. Blue and clouds. That was all that was mine." Her voice cracked. "The others had names. I didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. So they kept me separate." Rachel's voice was gentle. "Did Doris ever hurt you?" Bryn shook her head. "Not at first. She had this sing-song voice, gave me gummy bears and crayons, but if I didn't obey, if I looked away." Her voice dropped. "I got the box." Rachel frowned. "What box?" "A dog crate. No light, no sound. I used to scream. Then I didn't." Rachel sat still, her throat tight. "Who else was there?" "Mr. March," Bryn said bitterly. "He came at night, cleaned things, changed tapes, sometimes brought people." Rachel straightened. "What kind of people?" Men. They never talked to us, just watched, took notes, then left. Were you ever taken out of the nursery? Bryn nodded, eyes downcast. Once, just me. They said I was special, that I listened, that the others were dirty data. Rachel slid another image, a behavior card marked only Subject B. Bryn traced. It's Edge. That's his handwriting. He always used a ruler. Scratched the plastic with the pen. Do you remember the fire? Bryn nodded slowly. They were arguing. Doris cried. March said it was over, that the university had pulled out. He said it was time to clean the slate. A pause. He came for me first. Said I wasn't supposed to burn. Told me to go through the tunnel, into the woods. He said, walk until someone finds you. Then, never tell. Rachel swallowed hard. You were the only one he saved. I think he thought I was his success. What happened to Jamie? Bryn's hands clenched. She was brave. She whispered to me at night. She remembered her mom's voice, said she'd find her again. A beat. She didn't make it. How do you know? Bryn's voice cracked. Because he tried to take her too. She fought. She screamed. Then, nothing. And Milo, Lacey, they got sick. Doris said they weren't adjusting. She called it removal from cohort. She wrapped them in blankets. Said they went to sleep. Forever. She buried her face in her hands. They didn't go to sleep. Rachel reached across the table, touched her wrist. You survived. Bryn whispered, I don't know if that's a good thing. That night back in Willow Creek, Rachel documented everything. Bryn Caldwell, survivor, confirmation of 4 children, evidence of behavioral conditioning, confinement, systematic observation, evacuation by Stanley March before fire, premeditated cover-up. But questions still burned. Why save only one? Why erase everything but not the tapes? And who else might have known? At 1:13 a.m., Rachel's phone rang. Bryn. Her voice shook. Someone's been in my apartment. Rachel sat upright. What happened? The back closet. I never use it. It was open, and there was a note on the mirror. What did it say? Bryn's whisper chilled her. It said, Blue never left. Rachel arrived at Bryn's apartment by dawn. Modest second-floor unit. Quiet neighborhood. Ordinary. But inside, it felt violated. Bryn waited near the door, pale, trembling. I didn't touch anything. You did the right thing. The mirror was still fogged in the center, traced with a fingertip. Blue never left. The writing wasn't messy. It was clean, deliberate, done in wax or soap. Not childlike, no visible prints. In the unused back closet, Rachel found the attic panel slightly ajar. She retrieved a chair, pulled it open. Inside, a single cassette tape. Label Blue 27, in private. Rachel bagged it. Back at the department, she played it. Bryn's child voice, singing softly. Baby blue in the sky, don't look down or you will cry. Then static, a man's voice. Say it again, look at the light. Child's voice. Thank you for today. Louder. Thank you for today. Then silence. Then a new voice. Adult. Female. Recording. Complete. BB progressing. Isolation functioning. Rachel froze. It wasn't Doris. She ran it through the voice comparison system. No match in any database. But she remembered something, a signature on an old memo. KD. She pulled the university records. One name stood out. Dr. Kathleen Duvall. Cognitive specialist. Disappeared in 1989. No papers, no retirement, no death certificate. Rachel circled the name. She didn't believe Duvall was gone. Later that day, back in Willow Creek, Deputy Yates met Rachel outside the station. Jefferson County Library found a mailing list while cleaning out old university boxes. For what? A newsletter, VHS-based, members only. Dana handed her the header. The Promise Project, Monthly archives, private study, attached, a handwritten list of names, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky. At the bottom, S. March, Willow Creek, K. Duval, no address M. Trevors, P.O. Box 942, Camden, I. Rachel whispered the words. Promise Project. The name didn't exist in public databases, not in journals, not in case files, but it was etched onto the spines of every clamshell case. Property of the Promise Project. And someone, somewhere, was still watching. The tapes weren't merely records. They were relics. Shared, archived, protected. Rachel stared at the label. Princess Room, Volume 472. Etched on a VHS spine, and whispered aloud. They weren't hiding what they did. Dana, standing beside her, finished the thought with horror in her voice. They were building a library. That night, long after the station emptied out, Rachel remained in the dim-lit evidence room, surrounded by faces of the missing, by tapes, notes, the map of names she had pinned across the board like a battlefield. Doris Creighton, deceased. Stanley March, deceased. Dr. Kathleen Duval, missing. Bryn Caldwell, survivor, a.k.a. Baby Blue. Jamie, Milo, Lacey, presumed dead. Unknown members, active recipients of promise tapes. But her eyes always returned to the note left on Bryn's mirror. Blue never left. It hadn't been a warning. It had been a claim. Someone hadn't just watched Bryn. They'd marked her as property, as legacy. And that meant the Promise Project was not a ghost of the past. It was alive. Somewhere they were still filming, still archiving, still believing. April 21st, 2024, Camden, Indiana. Camden was no more than a breath of a town. One main street. No more than 500 residents. When Rachel stepped out of her car, the sun cast shadows like blades across the sidewalk. Her badge stayed hidden beneath her windbreaker. Her sunglasses masked the exhaustion in her eyes. She had driven 4 hours straight. The post office sat smaller than a gas station. Box 942, she told the postal clerk behind the glass. Law enforcement matter, connected to a Missouri cold case. The woman's face changed at the words. Her hand froze on the mail tray. Do you know who rents it? Rachel asked softly. The woman leaned in. Cash every 6 months, no return address, but he comes every Sunday. Same time, doesn't speak, wears a tan hat, old brown Buick, parks behind the sanctum hall. Rachel blinked. The what? The woman nodded. Used to be a Pentecostal church. Now they call it a meeting house. Doors locked, windows sealed. Sometimes, her voice dropped. Sometimes I see them bring children in. Never stay long. Rachel's heart thudded. Where? 3 blocks down. Turn left at the Willow. Big white building, no sign, cross carved in the porch. 20 minutes later, Rachel stood across from it. The building loomed like a forgotten relic. White clapboard, blacked out windows, and a silence that pulsed like breath held too long. Above the door, a security camera blinked. She knocked once, then louder. Detective Rachel Lier, Willow Creek PD. Open up. Silence. She circled the building. At the rear, she found it. A metal door, locked but unbolted, and a small slot in the wall marked Promise Materials Only. Her stomach twisted. They weren't just watching, they were still collecting, still building the library. That night, Rachel filed for a federal warrant. While she waited, she called Missouri's Forensic Archive team. Cross-referenced the phrase Family Sanctum or Sanctum Fellowship with the Promise Project. 10 minutes later, they called back. Found something, memo from 1986. Most redacted, but there's a quote at the top. The tech hesitated, then read aloud. A child must not be taught to escape, only to obey. That is the foundation of the sanctum. April 22nd, 2024. Surveillance, 3:37 a.m. Jefferson County deputies watched as a brown 1989 Buick pulled up behind Sanctum Hall. A man, white, 60s, thick glasses, tan hat, stepped out, carrying a small box. He entered silently. No lights turned on. 3 hours later, he left empty-handed. Rachel replayed the footage, frame by frame. Inside the box, she spotted labels. Princess Room, Volume 47, 2 Blue 29. Session complete. Her blood ran cold. Somewhere in the middle of Indiana, in an abandoned church, someone was archiving human suffering as if it were sacred scripture. April 24th, 2024. The warrant arrived. At 7:52 a.m., Rachel stood outside Sanctum Hall with a tactical team, rain misting down like a baptism gone wrong. "Ready on your call, detective?" Rachel nodded once. The door exploded inward. Officers flooded the space, but inside, silence. No fleeing, no cries, just empty air and the slow creak of old floorboards. The sanctuary was transformed. Velvet curtains smothered the windows. Fluorescent lights buzzed above rows and rows of metal shelving. Tape after tape, hard drive after hard drive. Labels like Princess Room Volume 0001 Blue 28. Integration Prep Subject Riley. Session 102. Rachel's breath caught. This wasn't storage. This was worship. A temple to control. Near the altar, now a desk. They found a locked cabinet. In a rear chamber once used for baptism, they found a trap door. Rachel descended first. Concrete walls, a single table, a black leather ledger. Inside, line after line, names, dates, codes. Lacey P. Willow Creek, erased Milo, R. Willow Creek, erased Jamie, H. Willow Creek, erased BB, delivered. She flipped through 150 names spanning decades, 5 states. Next to each child's name, statuses, erased, integrated, reclaimed, unresponsive. But only one entry was recent. Bryn Caldwell, blue. Status, recovered update 2024, surfaced, potential breach, SAR monitor. Rachel froze. Someone knew Bryn was alive. Someone had been watching her. And they hadn't used words like threaten or silence. They'd used the language of systems. Monitor. She bagged the ledger. Scan every tape, flag every name, contact Federal Child Services. This goes national now. That evening, back in Willow Creek, Rachel returned with 3 tapes and a portable hard drive. Alone, she inserted the first tape, Blue 28-in. The footage began with a pale girl, no older than 5, sitting on a pink rug, coloring. Rachel recognized her instantly. Bryn, too thin, her eyes vacant. Off camera, a man's voice spoke. "What's your name?" No answer. "Say it." A whisper. "I'm Baby Blue. And who do you belong to?" A pause. "You..." Rachel hit pause. Her hand trembled. She fast-forwarded. A birthday scene. 3 children in paper crowns. A banner overhead. "You're invited. Session 300 complete." Rachel whispered aloud. "These weren't children. They were projects." She turned to the hard drive. Password protected. She called in a forensic tech. "Break it. Use everything." Then, in her notebook, she wrote one final line. "We thought the nursery was the end. It was just the beginning." April the 25th, 2024. Willow Creek, Missouri. The first light of morning barely crept across the sleepy street as Detective Rachel Lier parked outside Bryn Caldwell's house. The oak trees loomed overhead, and dew clung to the earth like memory refusing to evaporate. She didn't knock for long. Bryn opened the door looking like a woman chased by ghosts. Her eyes were rimmed red, her hands clenched around sleeves worn from nervous habit. Still, she stepped aside, letting Rachel in without a word. In the kitchen, the silence was brittle. Rachel placed a black evidence bag on the table as if it held bones. She followed with the copied ledger pages, flipping to the one that mattered. Bryn Caldwell, blue. Status, recovered. 2024 surface contact, monitor. Bryn's breath caught. Her fingers twitched, but she said nothing. Then, quietly, "I already told you everything. Doris, The crate. The tunnel. The man. You did. Rachel nodded. But there's something else. She slid a photo across the table, a grainy still from a Sanctum Hall tape. 4 children sat in a half circle. Lacey, Milo, Jamie, and a 4th child, older, turned away, facing the wall. You told me there were 4 of you, Rachel said, but the tape shows 5. Bryn's face went slack. The dam cracked. His name was Nolan. I didn't know how to talk about him. He didn't speak, didn't blink. He just watched. I used to wonder if he was even alive. They treated him like a test case, like something to measure, not raise. She described the boy who flinched at touch, who bore wrist scars from restraints. The mirror room where he was kept wasn't just a cell. It was a stage, lit only for the audience on the other side of the glass. Rachel's notes confirmed it. In one mislabeled tape, volume 296, there was footage of a padded room with 1 chair and a mirrored wall. What happened to him? She asked. Bryn looked down. The night of the fire. I heard something, a bang, like a door sealing shut. I think March left him in there. I think Nolan burned. Rachel didn't answer. She just slid another image across the table, dated 1990, from Sanctum Hall. A boy, older now, emaciated, eyes glassy, a tag on his neck reading N01, Observation Wing. He survived, Rachel whispered. They moved him somewhere worse. Later that evening, Rachel confirmed it. Among the ledger's subjects tagged N01 to N09, only Nolan had no recorded exit status. Location redacted. Status unresolved. This wasn't a closed chapter. The nursery hadn't burned down, it had burrowed deeper. April 28, 2024. Ridgeview School for Children, Tennessee. The school stood forgotten atop the Cumberland Plateau, choked in vines, its windows broken like hollowed eyes. Rachel stepped through its carcass just after sunrise. She walked hallways where time had collapsed, rotting books, overturned desks, silence that pressed like a hand on the throat. At the end of a restricted corridor, a rusted steel door blocked her. Beneath peeling paint, an old keypad. She hot-wired it. The lock clicked. The door opened. The air was wrong. Not mold, not rot. It was preserved. She descended 50 steps. At the bottom, 5 identical doors. She checked each. The third stopped her cold. Inside, a cot. A tray bolted to the floor, scratches clawed into concrete. And on the wall, N01. Rachel whispered, "This is where they kept him." The cell wasn't empty. A broken chalkboard lay on the ground. The faint outline of a child's message scrawled in chalk, "Be good. Blue is watching." Behind the cot, inside a loose vent, she found a recorder. Taped to the back was a note. "He still remembers. You weren't the only one they named." Later that night, in a dimly lit office, Rachel and Bryn listened to the tape. "My name is N01, whispered a child's voice. "They call me Nolan. I don't like the dark. Blue sings when she thinks she's alone. I hear her in my sleep." Rachel glanced at Bryn, whose face had gone pale. "I hear the others through the pipes, through the floors. I'm going to leave something behind. Tell Blue. She wasn't the only one. I remember their names." Bryn wept. "They told me I was the only one left, that the others had to be cleansed." Rachel didn't answer. She didn't have to. She just wrote a new name under the word survivors. Nolan, location unknown. Status, presumed alive. April 30th, 2024, Creighton property, Willow Creek. At dusk, Rachel and Bryn returned to the ruins of the daycare. All that remained was a fractured porch and the blackened soil of what had once been a nursery. But Rachel had found an old blueprint in the archives, one that revealed a forgotten crawl space beneath the floor. A hidden place, not for children, for watchers. Flashlight in hand, they descended. Beneath the rotten roots, they found a tripod mount. A rusted camera pointing up tape reels labeled Princess Room Live Feed, a brittle clipboard, clinical notes cataloging trauma like it was science. Bryn read them aloud, voice shaking. B smiled when prompted, flinches at male voice. J mimicked L's scream. L calls herself good girl without prompt. Ideal subject. Rachel flipped to the final page. Red ink. Begin transfer May 4th. If fire occurs, presume data lost, not subjects. They planned it, she said. Bryn stared at the scorched beams above. They burned it on purpose. June 12th, 2024. Willow Creek Police Department. The package arrived late. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a camcorder tape labeled N01, final recording. A Polaroid dated 1989. A boy curled in a padded corner, his reflection absent from the mirror behind him. A scrap of paper, he's still in the mirror. Rachel locked the room and pressed play. Nolan appeared on screen, older now, haunted. His voice trembled. They say I'm the first. The key. I don't eat. I count shadows. I hear blues song. Then he turned to the mirror and reached toward it. His hand passed through. Not reflection, not metaphor. The glass rippled. I'm leaving soon, he whispered. Not through the floor, through the mirror, and when I go, I'm taking the others. Static, black. Rachel sat in the dark, frozen. She flipped the Polaroid. On the back, in pencil, only mirrors remember what they were told to forget. That night, she removed every reflective surface from the station. She didn't know what she believed anymore, only that Bryn hadn't been the last, and Nolan had never truly left.